Hi, welcome to the New Voting Project. My name is Kunal, your host, and today we have a very special guest joining us from the Bay Area, Malia Vella, the Vice Mayor of the City of Alameda, California. You have been a former staff member in the California State Senate and Assembly. You're also an adjunct professor at Mills College in Oakland, and you teach ethical policy making. I mean, I think you teach what you preach, so that's great.
I try to. I try
Yeah.
to.
Exactly. So thank you so much. You're a vice mayor. You're an elected official representing majority constituents in Alameda. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here with us. I can understand you're very busy, but I do appreciate it.
Absolutely. Happy to be here.
All right, so let's get started with these questions. Just to begin, talk a little bit about your background, how you got into the elected space, the organizing space. Touch on how your college experience prepared you for your current, role and career.
I think in college, I really got more involved on my own politically. I had done things, in high school and when I was younger with my parents, who were both very active. My mom was a teacher, my dad was a physicist. But when I went to college, in Massachusetts, I really got more involved locally. Worked on some campaigns. I worked on a Massachusetts State House campaign for a guy named Angus McQuilkin, who was fantastic. He was a former staffer. Just a total powerhouse. He ultimately lost, unfortunately, to a guy named Scott Brown, who we all know because Elizabeth Warren finally knocked him out. But I think in college, it was really exploratory for me. It was just something that my friends were doing and getting involved, and there was just an opportunity for that. I studied political science and architecture, so it was kind of a natural fit. And actually, when I was working on my thesis and as a senior, I got to participate in some programs that took me to DC, got me working on things like Hope Fund and some other things like that. So it was really, really fun for me, and just kind of was a natural fit with what I was studying in school. And one of my professors was actually Hillary Clinton's thesis advisor, and
Wow.
so there's just a lot of opportunities really to work with some really incredible seasoned politicians, and I got to intern in their offices. And so I went to law school because I was like, I'm gonna work on the legal side of things. After I graduated from college, I actually worked at like a big corporate law firm, Paul Weiss, which has a lot of really elite attorneys. They've worked on some amazing pro bono cases, and that was really what drew me there. So they were like representing folks that were in Guantanamo Bay and things like that as pro bono clients. And so I thought, okay, this is going to be a great opportunity. I think I want to study law. Went to law school after that, and I really focused on kind of nonprofit public sector. So I realized that the corporate world was not for me when I was at that big corporate firm, and really just focused on public interest and social justice law. And so a lot of my internships were really working in the community, working with folks with mental health issues, working with children in alternative courts, things like that. And so one of the things that kind of at the end of law school, I did my post bar at Equal Rights Advocates. And what I learned was it's really great to work on these cases, but it's so incremental. And you might be able to do some good for an individual or a small group of people, but that there's so much work out there that needed to be done on the policy side. And I was starting to work on Title IX stuff and workplace, representing women in the workplace, especially around, family leave and paid leave, things like that. And that kind of opened the door for me, and kind of accidentally stumbled into my first job. I met the state senator and some of her staff in San Leandro, just kind of out and about. And they let me know that they were hiring. And one of my friends from growing up was one of her staffers, and really said, "This is a great job. You're going to get to work on policy and organizing and all these things." And so a couple weeks later, I started that job. So it was really kind of fortuitous. It was one of those things that I literally fell into.
Yeah.
Um, and I loved it. It was great. And then I worked on some campaigns, and then was hired by Assemblymember Quirk, and ran his district office.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
My episode with him is going up tomorrow. Actually,
he's great. He's
yeah.
great. He is. I mean, honestly, I think in terms of like really uplifting women and women of color, he has done a phenomenal job within his staff of doing that, and really like empowered us to do some great things. So
Yeah.
that was kind of my pathway. And then I was a staffer, and I did like the Emerge program, and I mainly did it because I wanted to find some, awesome women candidates to go work for.
Right.
And didn't really want to run for office, to be honest with you. I thought there's no way I'm going to do that. Doesn't, I like being behind the scenes, working on the policy and kind of wonking out on stuff. And then just some crazy stuff was happening in my town that I grew up in. And I was seeing people that I knew like having to move home and like live in their parents' like guest bedroom, or getting evicted because rent was double digits. And I finally was trying to go around and like organize and get somebody to run. And our attorney general, Rob Bonta, told me, so here's the thing. If you're not willing to do it, but you're going around asking people, like, why would anybody do something you're not willing to do yourself? I think you should do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I got goaded into it by our attorney general.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I mean, that's a good story. See, I'm in that frame. I've been on the campaign side. I've been behind the scenes a lot. And
Hmm.
I've realized, like you said, like I focus on the policy, what's affecting my community where I live, and then I realize it's an absolute shit show. And I'm like,
Yep.
I really want to run for office, but I try to find people who run for office.
Yeah.
I'm in that struggle. We're gonna be there for the June primaries. Trust me.
Yeah.
So I understand, but no, that's a very, I guess, that's a great journey to be on. I think you've hit all the dots of politics and community organizing.
But that's like how it happens, right? It's
Yeah,
it like organizing is organic, right? Like that is the heart of organizing. And I think in many times it's not about trying to like get your way there by some calculated measure. It's really the best people for it kind of fall into it. And you fall into it at the right time because you're passionate about those issues, you understand them, and you're able to organize in a way that is not just compelling, but is really based on, it comes from the heart. It's authentic.
yeah, no, 100% agree. And I'm glad we have you as a vice mayor in Alameda. I don't live in Alameda, but I've heard many great things. And I just would like to follow up. You're
Hmm.
on the city council. You obviously have to make decisions. What are some of the key objectives you're looking to accomplish in your tenure? What are the policies that you're looking to enforce? Are you exploring, potentially moving up to higher office? What are things you want to bring to the community to solve some of the issues we face?
I mean, look, the greatest issue facing our country is the wealth gap and the fact that it's growing. And I think there are ways we can impact that at the local government level. So, for me, I've really been focused on housing.
Hmm.
I think, at a base level, housing is a human right. We don't. It's like the fact that that is this controversial thing to say, and the fact that it really isn't a thing in the United States. Housing is really not a human right. We have this really capitalist system that causes the wealth gap to just expand, and the space between the have and have nots continues to grow. So things that I've really been working on have been around tenant protections, making sure that we don't see more people facing housing, instability, getting displaced, making sure that we're building more housing and that we're building housing at all income levels. It is possible. You can get good projects that meet the needs of the community.
Yeah.
There's really only two things you do on city council. I'm going to dispel all the myths about it. Like, you spend all of your time on zoning and land use.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. And then you also administer services. And there's some basic services that you administer: public safety, right? Access to parks, things like that, public works. And you really just need to make sure that you're doing those basic things, and that really makes sure that your community has good quality of life. So at the base level, we don't want to increase the number of people who need social services. So, around, you can use zoning and land use to make sure that you have things like tenant protections. I worked really hard. That was one of the first things that I did. And then just make sure that you're building enough housing, transitional housing, supportive housing, all of those things. And I think the other thing is really, there's been so much trauma as a result of the pandemic. We can talk about all the economic harm that's happened and how we can keep our businesses afloat. That's something that I've worked on. But really, we also need to just make sure that we are compassionate at all levels and that we allow for our community to heal in ways that are supportive. And so I really don't like when we start talking about, we've got the city council and we've got the school board. The school board handles all these things. We're really been asking our school districts to do so much more than what they're supposed to be doing. And those are shared constituents. So when we talk about mental health and student mental health, there's no reason that the city shouldn't be working in partnership with our school districts. So that's something that I've been really working on, and making sure that we have unarmed responses to de-escalate and to provide services rather than just send somebody in that's armed to try to address calls for service, things like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, just recently they they recalled 3 members of the
Yes.
school board in San
Yes.
Francisco. So no, I understand the appeal, and they should honestly be working together. Same basic constituents, and like you said, same issues. I think school board, and this is something Assemblymember Quirk told me. He's been goading me into running for office.
Good.
Uh, and what he's been saying is that school board is likely one of the most difficult positions right now in our time, because you're dealt with not only educating the future generations, i.e.,
Mhm.
but you're now addressing public health issues, public safety issues, and you're seeing the disparities and inequities that other like external forces provide, right? So
Yeah.
it's a tough job, and yeah, please run for office if you're listening to this. We need more.
Absolutely. If you're listening, you've already done 50% of the work, 90% of the work.
That's true. Now you got to do the other 90%, which is run a campaign.
Mhm.
um, but no, and I think the essence of this podcast is to actually discuss the state of voting. And what I tend to focus on is the 2020 election. It really set a different standard of what voting looks like in our country. And then now we see this kind of backlash and reaction to restricting voting laws and not creating federal mandates and, and things of that sort. And so I want to ask you, post the 2020 election, now we're going into the 2022 primaries. What are you seeing? How do we get folks out to vote? What incentive do people have?
Well, I mean, I think the incentive is always there, which is if you don't vote, other people get to decide for you. Like that is the most powerful thing ever. Like that should motivate you. Like if you
Yeah,
don't like something, you really have yourself to blame, because you should be able to go to the ballot box. And there's a whole population of people that are unable to, because we have restricted their voting rights. And it's a privilege, and it's a privilege to be able to have a say in not only what the policies are. I mean, we have local, the other thing is, in California, if you don't vote and you don't care about things like school board, you're saying that you don't care about your child, and you don't care about what happens to your child's school and where funds are spent and things like that. To your earlier point about school boards really having to deal with a number of different issues to address the whole child, we have local control. It's not a top down system. So these decisions are being made. They're being made on Mondays and Tuesday and Wednesday nights, in your community. And you get to have a say in who's there, how much money they have, right? You get to have a say in what their plan is, essentially. So this is a huge, you know, it's a huge opportunity, but it's also a huge privilege.
yeah,
I think other things that we need to do to incentivize people. I mean, frankly, I come from a union background too. I worked for the Teamsters for many years. I mean, everyone, if you work for a union and you're negotiating a contract, you should be putting language into your contract to make sure that your workers can get time off to go vote. Because sometimes those contracts, yeah, there's some protection, but it's really narrowly tailored. And when we're seeing people having to stand in lines, I mean, right now during COVID, at least in California, we're allowed to have vote by mail elections. But
Right.
it's much harder to get people, even though the ballot's getting sent to their house. And we saw this in San Francisco, like the voting turnout is not, um, hasn't been great in all of these special elections that have occurred, right? They've been fairly low, even though everyone's getting a ballot sent to their house because everyone's so preoccupied. So you still need to carve out time and opportunities for workers to get there. We can't take that for granted. Um, so I think time off is something that we need to do. We also need to make it easier for people to vote and register. There's been a lot of people that have moved around during the pandemic, so ballots are getting mailed to the wrong address, and it's really difficult to get your vote in and your ballot in when you got other things that are competing for your time.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I haven't actually. I never thought about that. The idea of within a contract, designate time to vote. That's actually a pretty good idea. Um, I feel like all unions should do that. That seems pretty straightforward.
If you're scheduled to vote on us, I mean, there should be an opportunity for people if they need to go down to the registrar's office or whatever and get something sorted out or submit, put in a provisional ballot or whatever they need to do, or do early voting because they're scheduled to work. Like those are things that we should be able to work out. I think there are some things that we learned during COVID, like the drive-through ballots, ballot places, things like
Right.
that. Like maybe that doesn't go away. Finding opportunities for people to do voting on school sites, so that when you're dropping your kid off at school, you can drop your ballot off. We need to make it easier for people to vote.
Yeah, I agree. I concur.
But I mean, like when I worked on campaigns, like for instance, when I was working on Obama's reelect and I was in Iowa, it's like some
Oh,
of the polling places there. I don't know if you've ever worked on campaigns in the Midwest, but some of them are like in churches. Like imagine being a person of color and having to go to like the white conservative church to go vote because that's where you get to vote in your precinct, right? Those sorts of things will cause people to not feel comfortable voting. It's a
right.
barrier.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see these barriers in other states right now, Texas, Georgia, kind of this wave of moving that ballot box. You know how they keep it outside for the compliance for physically disabled folks, so they can just
Yeah.
drop it off. Moving that inside, having
Right.
a poll worker not be able to grab a bottle of water or hand them out to folks, that
Right.
becomes a crime, right? These types
Right.
of scenarios, they're small inconveniences, but they may avert somebody's ability to vote. Um, so yeah, no, definitely agree. And in some cities, and that's the cameo that we didn't talk about at the beginning. But in some cities, in some municipalities, they've kind of introduced a youth vote. And he agrees because he's a youth. But what do you think of this idea of allowing younger folks to vote, 16, 17-year-olds, and kind of preparing them to start that cycle of voting for later years?
Sorry, I've got a little one who's
No
disgruntled
worries.
here. She thinks that they should be able to vote.
She,
I agree. I agree.
she.
I mean, look, you're old enough to get your license. You're old enough to operate a motor vehicle that's thousands of pounds and can cause harm. Like you should be able to vote. And I think when we, especially around high school students and the decisions that are being made, like to at least let people vote for school board. I mean, I don't know why we're trying to say no. You can operate a motor vehicle. You can do a lot of different things, but no, you can't have a say in your in the governance of your schools. A little problematic, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Maybe we should speak with the Alameda School Board, get something done.
Well, I mean, everyone's starting to have student representatives, right, on their school
Yeah,
board,
yeah, yeah,
right? So
yeah.
it's like you're good enough to be there and weigh in on things, but you're
Just
not
can't
good
vote
enough.
for it.
You're not good enough to actually have a vote.
Yeah, seems a little interesting. Um, yeah, no, I think folks should definitely have the availability to vote for decisions that are being made about their curriculum, what time they got to wake up in the morning. It only makes logical sense for you to have a say in that. But yeah, some cities I think they're piloting it in Oakland right now and
Hmm.
Maryland as well. And hopefully the results will show an uptick in turnout, and that'll be a driver for other cities to follow. So I leave that with you as something to maybe do in the future,
Yeah.
or get accomplished at a state level or something. But I always want to ask this of anybody who comes on the show, which is what do you recommend folks do? That, you've obviously had a lot of opportunity and ways to get involved. You mentioned several internships that you did in college, post college. What can the youth do to get involved, impact the voting, impact their elections, and just stay engaged? Like, how do we get these folks to come out? Most of them don't care, and of the majority, of the very small minority that do, it's not usually enough. You know,
I don't think, but do you think it's that people don't care, or do you think it's that people have so many different things weighing on them? Like, I feel like there's a lot going on. Like, when you're in high school, you're like thinking about what's my next, like, everyone's asking you, like, what college are you going to? What are you going to do after high school?
those are the
You know?
questions I get asked.
So
I'm in
that's what yeah, but like, but that's the kind of stuff. And like, I'm 37. I'm still deciding what I'm going to be when I grow up. Like, gosh, why are you trying to put so much pressure and like put me in a box? But I think that there's so many different competing things, and we're asking people. I mean, again, going back to like the economics of it, like you can only afford to go do an unpaid internship if you have housing. You can only afford, like, time is valuable, and we are asking so much of people in terms of doing free labor. And oftentimes we look at our youth and we're like, hey, by the way, can you go do this, can you get engaged? And we aren't thinking about the barriers, even if, and so that's why stipends matter, internships, working on and I think there are a lot of really good paid campaign opportunities for folks to get engaged on and with. And so I would just say, find a candidate, find somebody that you believe in or that you see yourself in. I think it's more easily said in the Bay Area than it might be elsewhere. Find an issue that you're passionate in. We're all impacted by people that get to make decisions about housing. We are all impacted by people who get to make decisions about transit. One of the activities that I often have my students do at Mills on the first day is to write down every single elected office that represents them, like that they get to vote on, and then write down the names of the people that hold those positions. And these are intelligent, very bright college students who can't name, like, they don't realize that there's like AC Transit, right? And that there's at large positions in districts and the BART board and, East Bay Mud, right? The water districts. So I think, basic things to do is like educate yourself on this. Like, you are represented by so many different individuals on all of these different governing bodies, and they're making significant decisions about your life. Know who they are, like, know that they exist. I think that's one thing. Another thing is, like, at a basic level, try to figure out when the election is and see if you can even just go and meet the candidates. They often do these meet and greets and have these really kind of sometimes boring debates. I feel like, having gone through it, like, you sit in these candidate forums and it's the same people. It's the same people at every forum. And we need to find ways to expand that. One thing that happened in Alameda that I loved was that our youth did their own forum. They were like, no, we don't care about these. We have other questions we want to ask you. Right. So that's something else people could do. And, if the candidates aren't going to take time to meet with you and meet you where you're at and be there to answer your questions, like, that should raise a red flag.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I've had the honor of hosting several forums. I did one literally last weekend, so for the DA's race in Alameda County. So, yeah, no, I understand. It's the same people showing up asking the same questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but no, please get involved, and at the very least, vote.
At the very least, if you can. I mean, there's so many people that can't, right? And I think the other thing is, like, we saw so many people give up. Like, we don't often talk about this with like our immigrant populations, but like people that are holding on, they might be here legally, right? But they're not quite willing to, like, even, there's been some elected officials where it was like it took their kid being on the ballot for like the parent, right? The parent of the elected official to like actually decide, okay, yeah, I'm gonna just go ahead and like get that US citizenship so I can vote. And there's a lot that people do. People have died for the right to vote. Like, the least you can do is find your ballot, read it, and turn it in.
Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. I think, yeah, that's great.
But I think the other thing is we need paid postage on the vote by mail. That's the other thing I forgot to add.
It's not pay. I thought they give you like, it just comes like when I voted by mail last year, or at least helped my parents do it. They gave you a paid stamp, paid like yellow one, the orange one.
Mhm.
They sent it back, right?
That's not so that's pre-pandemic.
Yeah.
You either had to like put postage on it.
Oh, pre-pandemic. You're referring. Yeah, I'm talking in pandemic.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying, like,
Yeah.
we should just, and it should say on the out, like, we need to make it very clear that it's your ballot. Like, it's hard, right? That's
Yeah.
another thing is like the thing should be like neon and it should just be like, this is your ballot on the outside, right? Like, just make it very clear. And then on the inside, it should be like, here's the free like, here's the free envelope, here's the free postage. Because otherwise, we're expecting people to get in a car and drop it off somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Which, in Alameda, okay, people can do that, or or get on a bike and drop it off, or you know mail it in and spend money they don't have on postage.
Yeah. I think these very like small, like unnecessary things just need to be removed and make the process really easy. Right?
Yeah.
Nobody here is reinventing the wheel. One of the things that we celebrate Stacey Evans for is that she made it really easy for Georgians to just go out and vote. She made
Hmm.
it really easy. She made a huge website. She said, "Find your polling location." Boom, I found it. I'm gonna go there. Like, if we create accessibility and convenience, that's everything to a voter. That's everything to a consumer. I mean, that's
Right.
all. That's all it is. So yes, make things easy for people. Uh,
Make things accessible.
yeah,
Make things accessible. Like, talk to somebody who has access issues and find out what are the barriers, and then those are the things that you do.
yeah, yeah. No, definitely. Well, thank you so much for taking the time on this episode. I just want to allow you to put your social medias or websites out there. I'll link it all in the description for anybody who's listening.
It's maliavella.com. I keep it simple. And you can find me on Instagram, Maliersv, Maliersv. And I'm also on Twitter, Malia Vella.
Perfect. No, I'll put it all in the description. Thank you so much for taking the time. Really appreciate you giving some great advice, and I think people will find it very invaluable.
Awesome. And you're going to run for president someday, right?
Oh, I don't know about that. That was unscripted, and I didn't pay. So just to make it clear.
Well, let me know so that I can make sure that I go out and campaign for you.
Exactly, exactly. I need seasoned veteran campaigners.
See, when somebody asks you to run, you say, is that an endorsement? Here's the PAC that you can donate to.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
when can
yeah.
I sign you up to host a house party and walk a precinct for me?
Yeah, I've had to ask that of people, but you already endorsed me, so it's cool.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Thank you so much. Please take care, stay safe, and you're always welcome back on the show anytime.
Thank you.
All right.